So GMOs, we've
Yeah.
talked about GMOs before. Can you give me like a 5-minute sort of GMO 101?
Yeah.
Because people you just say GMO, people freak out. They go Monsanto and everyone goes nuts.
And lately there's this added confusion because a scientist who I've interviewed many times across multiple platforms named Kevin Folta has been in the news a lot because of a FOIA request that revealed some things that people didn't want to see, mostly things that he never denied anyway.
Yeah.
But
and it wasn't a lot of money that he got and all that. But that's a whole other topic.
The ethics get complicated. But regardless of that, if we're going to talk about the core of GMOs, these other conversations really are irrelevant to this core conversation.
Yeah, so literally 101.
Sure.
Like focus, if you don't know anything about
Yeah, so what is a GMO? Well, technically the word genetically modified organism could refer to anything, any organism, anything that's alive in which the genes have been modified. So basically, breeding two plants together to try and get a desired trait is technically GMO. Now that's not how we casually use the word anymore. We usually use the term GMO to actually refer to transgenic organisms. So these are organisms where they weren't selectively bred for particular traits, but there was actually a transgene that was inserted. We've gone into the laboratory, we've tested, and we've found these genetic markers, these areas where we can do something to the plant. Generally, we're talking about plants. There are some animals that are up for FDA approval, like salmon. Mm-hmm. But generally, we're talking about plants. And scientists will say, for example, this is a big one right now, citrus greening is wiping out oranges in Florida. Wiping them out, they're all really sick. It's getting harder and harder to get fresh oranges. And this is a problem that they don't see going away. Can we make oranges that are resistant to this disease? Mm-hmm. Because if we don't, we may not have oranges anymore. So these scientists work very hard to go into the genome to try and understand all of these different genes within the plant and try and modify them in a certain way. Sometimes it involves taking a gene from another plant and inserting it. Sometimes it involves turning a gene on, silencing a gene, making a gene do something that maybe it wouldn't have done unless it was under pressure. There's a lot of different ways that you can genetically modify a plant.
But and these are things we've done for a long time for all kinds of different plants.
Oh, yeah. And there are literally thousands of research versions of GMOs, but there are very few GMOs that are on the market. And I think that's another big misconception. You'll see, labels on crazy stuff. Like you'll see labels on potatoes that are like GMO free. And it's like, well, yeah, because there's no such thing as a GMO potato. Like,
because they're not modifying it to stop either bugs from eating.
I mean, they are in the lab, but you can't buy it yet.
Right.
So the thing is, the only crops that are available are mostly big ag crops. So corn is genetically modified, probably most of the corn that you eat. Mm-hmm. Soybeans, sugar beets. Papaya is genetically modified. A genetically modified apple just came on the market, or it's about to. I think it's the Okinawa apple, and it doesn't brown. You can take a bite out of it and sit it on a table and it doesn't brown. It's pretty cool.
So
I tried it.
Did you try it?
It tastes like an apple.
And you didn't grow some weird?
I did not.
Nothing.
You've eaten a lot of GMOs in your day, and I don't see any appendages that aren't supposed to be there.
Yeah, well, you can't see them. All right, so from that very sort of simplistic explanation of what GMOs are, why do so many people hate GMOs?
Because people are afraid of what they don't understand. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so there are some legitimate concerns when it comes to environmental consequences. I think probably the most legitimate concern when it comes to GMOs is a normal outcome of evolution. And I use the example of superbugs with antibiotics because I think it's a good analogy. So when we take antibiotics, we actually induce resistance in the bugs that can infect us. And now there are whole classes of bugs that are resistant to those antibiotics. Just like in GMO plants, when you alter them to resist certain pests or to resist, mostly with the pests, when you alter them to resist those pests, you may have new pests that evolve a resistance to that resistance. You see it a little bit with weeds too, like the glyphosate argument, which is Roundup. People are really scared of Roundup. BT is more the pest thing, and the glyphosate is more of the weed thing, and people sometimes mix those things up.
That's sort of where Monsanto gets involved, but
we'll
cover that another time.
Sure. We're talking about the potential for super weeds to grow because these plants are helping them grow. It's a natural process, and it doesn't just happen in GM. It happens any time that you're doing large-scale agriculture. Mm-hmm. And so I like to say to people, would you want to take all the antibiotics off the market because they're making antibiotic resistant. No, we need to be smarter about how we use them, and we need to come up with new antibiotics. And so what scientists are actually doing is they're trying to figure out new and better ways to improve resistance to these different bugs. Let's say that there is a pesticide inside of a plant and the bug develops resistance to that pesticide. Well, if you actually alter that plant in two ways now, you have two lines of defense against this bug, it's statistically very unlikely that you'll get a mutation in that bug against both of those lines of resistance. So now you can have a resistant plant and you're less likely to see resistance occurring in the bug. So, you know, scientists are always trying to keep one step ahead of nature, and these are the biggest problems that we're seeing with genetic modification. A lot of the problems that people think are happening with genetic modification, cancer, you know, health problems, what's a big one? Seeds blowing into another field and getting sued for it.
Again, that's the Monsanto part of
suicides in India.
Yeah.
None of these are substantiated.
Yeah.
None of them. The science shows time and time again that these are not real concerns. And if you actually do dig into the case law and you actually do try and understand what has happened legally in these situations, most of those lawsuits with the big ag companies involve people storing seeds, which is technically against the law.
Right.
Now, if you have a problem with, you know, patenting a seed.
Right. Again, it's sort of a whole other.
Or if you have a problem with large-scale agribusiness and you have a problem with the way that we, you know, dry out the land by only farming a very particular crop, I get that. But that has nothing to do with genetic modification, and I think we often conflate the issues.
Yeah.